September 12, 2025, North Sea, 87 kilometers from the Danish coast. A service vessel holds position in 4-meter swells, its computer systems making thousands of micro-adjustments per second to maintain precise coordinates. On deck, technicians prepare for a workday that will take them 260 meters above the ocean surface, higher than the Golden Gate Bridge towers, to maintain industrial machinery the size of city buildings. For the next 2 weeks, these workers will not see land. Their workplace spans 400 square kilometers of open ocean, dotted with turbines that could power entire cities. We're about to see how offshore wind work represents the extreme edge of human adaptation, where workers must psychologically rewire themselves to accept isolation, danger, and loss of control as normal conditions of employment. The journey begins at a harbor. Workers arrive with duffel bags containing 2 weeks' worth of personal items. The service vessel that will become their entire world sits at the dock 90 meters long, equipped with workshops, sleeping quarters, and dining facilities for 60 people. The psychological shift starts during the 2-hour journey offshore. The horizon transforms into an unbroken circle of water and sky. Many describe this moment as crossing an invisible threshold, leaving behind the familiar world of roads, buildings, and immediate help. Upon arrival at the wind farm, the scale becomes apparent. Modern offshore turbines stand 260 meters tall from sea level to blade tip. Their rotors sweep an area larger than a football field. The generator housing at the top, called a nacelle, is often the size of a double-decker bus. Workers must mentally process that this towering, isolated machinery will be their office for the next 2 weeks. The wind farm operates continuously. There are no weekends, no holidays, no closing hours. Radio contact with shore is limited and formal. Personal phone calls require satellite connections that can be unreliable. Workers begin to understand that their primary human connections for the next 2 weeks will be with the 20 to 30 people aboard their vessel. The first night aboard the service vessel marks the completion of their transition. Workers sleep in single-person cabins barely larger than a closet, listening to the constant hum of engines and the movement of the sea. Many report lying awake that first night, processing the reality that they are now completely dependent on the vessel, their crewmates, and their own psychological resilience. The alarm sounds at 5 a.m., cutting through the mechanical noise of the vessel. Workers have learned to wake instantly. There is no snooze button in an environment where every minute of daylight matters. Breakfast in the mess hall is deliberately hearty, prepared by professional chefs who understand that food quality directly impacts morale and performance. The toolbox talk follows breakfast, a mandatory safety briefing that reviews the day's tasks, weather conditions, and potential hazards. The supervisor reads from a prepared script, but everyone listens intently. This is the verbal contract that will govern how they manage life-threatening situations. Then comes the ritual of transformation. In the changing room, workers begin donning their survival equipment. First is the immersion suit, a thick waterproof covering designed to keep them alive if they fall into the North Sea. The suit is heavy, restrictive, and uncomfortably warm, but it provides thermal protection in water that can kill from hypothermia in minutes. Over this goes a life jacket with a personal locator beacon, ensuring they can be found if the worst happens. Next is the climbing harness, connecting them to safety lines that will prevent falls. A helmet protects against head injuries. Safety glasses shield their eyes from wind and debris. Steel-toed boots provide grip on metal surfaces. Heavy gloves maintain dexterity while protecting hands. The process takes 15 to 20 minutes and adds significant weight and bulk to their bodies. This extensive preparation serves a psychological purpose beyond physical protection. Each piece of equipment is a reminder of the risks they face and the precautions necessary for survival. Workers report that putting on the gear helps them mentally transition from civilian to technician, from safe to exposed, from comfortable to alert. By the end of this ritual, ordinary people have been transformed into specialized operators, equipped to survive in one of the most dangerous work environments on Earth. The transformation is both physical and mental. They now carry the weight of their survival equipment and the psychological burden of knowing that their next few hours will be spent in extreme isolation and danger. The walk-to-work gangway extends from the service vessel like a mechanical arm reaching toward the turbine. The system uses hydraulics and computer controls to maintain a stable connection despite the constant motion of both the vessel and the wind turbine in the swells. Workers must trust this technology completely. It's their only path to and from their workplace, 260 meters above the ocean. As the vessel rises and falls with 3-meter waves, the gangway's tip remains perfectly steady against the turbine's access platform. Computer systems make thousands of micro-adjustments per second to compensate for the ship's movement. Workers learn to trust the machinery more than their own senses, which tell them that walking across a moving bridge in the middle of the ocean should be impossible. Once inside the turbine tower, the real ascent begins. The tower's interior is a cylindrical space, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. A small elevator carries workers partway up, but the final ascent to the nacelle requires climbing multiple ladders, sometimes over 100 meters of vertical climbing, while carrying tools and wearing full safety equipment. The physical demands are extreme. Workers ascend while wearing 20 to 30 pounds of safety equipment, carrying additional tools, and maintaining 3 points of contact with the ladder at all times. Their breathing becomes labored in the confines of the immersion suit. Many describe the ascent as a form of physical and mental test that must be passed every single workday. The nacelle at the top is a cramped workspace filled with massive machinery. The generator alone weighs several tons. Gearboxes, cooling systems, and control equipment leave little room for human movement. Workers must navigate around these components while wearing bulky safety gear, often in temperatures that can range from below freezing to over 40 degrees Celsius. The work itself requires extreme focus. Technicians troubleshoot electrical systems, replace components, and perform maintenance while surrounded by machinery that operates under tremendous stress. A single mistake, touching the wrong wire, using incorrect torque specifications, or failing to properly isolate energy sources can result in electrocution, crushing injuries, or system failures. Perhaps most psychologically challenging is the isolation. Once inside the nacelle, workers are completely cut off from visual contact with their vessel and crewmates. Radio communication provides their only connection to other humans. They work in a space that sways with the wind, surrounded by machinery noise, with no immediate escape route except the long climb back down through the tower. The isolation creates social bonds unlike anything found in land-based work. When 20 to 30 people are confined to a vessel for weeks at a time, completely dependent on each other for safety and sanity, normal social hierarchies and personal boundaries dissolve. Workers describe their crewmates as closer than siblings, more trusted than spouses. Trust develops quickly out of necessity. When you're harnessed to a safety line 260 meters above the ocean, your life literally depends on your partner's attention and competence. When mechanical systems fail, your crewmates are your only source of help. When personal crises occur, your fellow workers are the only people available to provide support. The mess hall becomes the social center of this artificial family. Meals are scheduled around shift changes, creating natural gathering times when workers decompress and connect. Professional chefs prepare varied menus specifically designed to maintain morale. Theme nights, birthday celebrations, and special meals mark time and create shared experiences. Conversations in the mess hall reveal the unique psychology of offshore work. Workers discuss technical problems with the intensity of people whose livelihoods depend on mechanical systems. They share stories about previous rotations, other wind farms, and career experiences that outsiders cannot fully understand. They develop inside jokes and shared references based on their common experiences of isolation, danger, and technical challenges. Internet access, when available through satellite connections, provides a lifeline to the outside world. Workers video call their families, but these conversations often highlight the growing disconnect between their offshore life and their land-based relationships. Family members cannot fully understand the technical challenges, physical demands, or psychological pressure of offshore work. Conflicts, when they arise, must be resolved quickly and completely. There is no option to avoid difficult personalities or take time apart. Workers develop sophisticated conflict resolution skills and learn to set aside personal disagreements in favor of operational effectiveness. The safety culture reinforces this cooperation. Personal disputes that affect work performance create risks for everyone aboard the vessel. Many workers report that their strongest emotional connections are with their offshore crew rather than their land-based family and friends. The intensity of shared experience, mutual dependence, and common challenges creates bonds that persist long after rotations end. The weather forecast becomes the most important document aboard the vessel. Every morning, the crew gathers to review wind speeds, wave heights, visibility conditions, and storm tracking data. These numbers determine whether they can work or whether they will spend another day confined to the vessel, waiting for conditions to improve. Operational limits are absolute and non-negotiable. Gangway transfers halt when significant wave heights exceed 2.5 to 3 meters. Helicopter operations require specific wind speed and visibility parameters. Weather days test the crew's psychological resilience in ways that normal work cannot. When storms trap them aboard the vessel for days at a time, workers must cope with complete powerlessness over their situation. They cannot work, cannot leave, and cannot predict when conditions will improve. The vessel becomes a floating prison where 20 to 30 people must coexist in cramped quarters with nothing productive to accomplish. The psychological impact accumulates over time. Workers report initial frustration at lost productivity, followed by boredom, then claustrophobia, and finally a form of learned helplessness where they surrender control entirely to natural forces. Some describe weather delays as more mentally challenging than the actual work, because the work at least provides purpose and forward progress. Coping strategies vary among crew members. Some workers use weather days for maintenance tasks on the vessel itself. Others retreat to their cabins for extended periods, watching downloaded movies or reading. The gym sees heavy use during weather delays as workers burn off nervous energy and frustration through physical exercise. Storm conditions create their own psychological challenges. The vessel's motion becomes more pronounced in heavy seas, making sleep difficult and causing seasickness is even among experienced workers. The sound of wind and waves against the hull is constant and loud, creating a sensory environment that many find overwhelming. The waiting becomes a form of psychological discipline. Workers learn to accept that nature sets the schedule, not human ambition or corporate demands. This acceptance is essential for long-term success in offshore work, but it requires abandoning the land-based assumption that willpower and effort can overcome external obstacles. When weather conditions finally improve and work can resume, the psychological relief is immediate and obvious. Workers emerge from their enforced confinement with renewed energy and motivation. The return to productive activity provides both purpose and distraction from the accumulated stress of weather delays. The rotation schedule creates a systematic separation from land-based life that accumulates psychological costs over time. Workers spend half their lives in a completely different world, missing the daily experiences and gradual changes that define normal human relationships. They become observers of their own families' lives rather than active participants. Children adapt to having an offshore parent in ways that reveal the profound impact of repeated absence. They learn to compress weeks of experiences into phone calls and video chats. They stop mentioning daily events that their offshore parent cannot participate in or understand. They develop closer relationships with the remaining parent and learn to be emotionally self-sufficient during the absent parent's rotation periods. Marriages face unique stresses that land-based couples cannot fully comprehend. Offshore workers return home every few weeks to find that their spouse has adapted to single parenthood, made important decisions without consultation, and developed routines that don't include them. The returning worker must readjust to family dynamics that have evolved in their absence, often feeling like a guest in their own home. Many workers report feeling increasingly disconnected from their land-based community and more connected to their offshore crew. Emergency situations on land create particular anguish for offshore workers. When family members face medical crises, relationship problems, or financial difficulties, offshore workers can offer only remote support through satellite phone calls. The cycle of separation and reunion creates emotional exhaustion for everyone involved. Many offshore workers eventually face a choice between their career and their family relationships. The financial benefits and professional opportunities of offshore work conflict with the human cost of repeated separation. Some workers transition to land-based careers, accepting significant income reductions. The transition from offshore to onshore life creates a psychological whiplash that many workers struggle to manage effectively. After weeks of complete structure, constant purpose, and intense social bonds, returning to land-based life feels disorienting and emotionally flat. Workers describe feeling like they're living in two completely different worlds, with different identities, relationships, and sources of meaning. The physical reentry begins with the journey back to port. As land becomes visible on the horizon, workers report mixed emotions: relief at returning home anxiety about readjusting to family life, and sadness at leaving their offshore crew. The helicopter flight or boat journey that returns them to shore marks the end of their role as specialized technicians and the beginning of their role as family members. The lack of mechanical noise, constant motion, and structured schedule can be jarring after weeks of total sensory immersion in the offshore environment. Many workers report difficulty sleeping in stationary beds, eating meals without the social interaction of the mess hall, and managing their time without the rigid framework of 12-hour shifts. Family dynamics require immediate and ongoing adjustment. Spouses have learned to function independently and may resent having their routines disrupted by the returning worker. Children have adapted to the absent parent's absence and may seem distant or uninterested in reconnecting. Social situations become challenging because most people cannot relate to the offshore experience. Casual conversations about work feel meaningless compared to the life and death situations offshore workers face daily. Friends' problems seem trivial compared to the technical and psychological challenges of offshore life. The pace of land-based life feels simultaneously too slow and too chaotic. After weeks of structured routine focused entirely on essential tasks, the complexity of normal life, paying bills, maintaining property, managing social obligations, can feel overwhelming and pointless. Workers often struggle to find motivation for activities that seemed important before they began offshore work. Some workers develop a pattern of emotional detachment from land-based life. They begin to view their time on shore as a temporary break from their real life offshore, rather than a return to normal life. This psychological shift protects them from the pain of repeated separation, but damages their ability to maintain meaningful land-based relationships. The countdown to the next rotation begins almost immediately after returning home. Workers know that within days or weeks, they will again leave their family, board the vessel, and return to the offshore world that has become their primary source of identity and purpose. This knowledge affects every interaction and decision during their time at home. Many workers report that they feel most comfortable and competent during their offshore rotations. The technical challenges, clear objectives, and team relationships provide a sense of purpose and accomplishment that land-based life cannot match. This creates a psychological dependency on offshore work that makes it difficult to consider alternative careers. The reentry problems often worsen over time rather than improve. Each rotation cycle reinforces the division between offshore and onshore identity. Workers become more skilled at offshore work and more comfortable with offshore relationships, while their land-based skills and relationships gradually deteriorate. The offshore wind industry has created something unprecedented in human experience, a workplace that requires ordinary people to psychologically rewire themselves for extreme isolation, accept powerlessness as routine, and build their strongest relationships with people who share their unique form of exile. These workers have developed coping mechanisms, social structures, and mental frameworks that allow them to function effectively in conditions that would break most people, learning to find meaning in technical work performed under extraordinary stress while building artificial families stronger than many biological ones. The turbines they maintain will power millions of homes for decades, generating clean energy that reduces carbon emissions and combats climate change. Yet the individual cost, measured in missed family moments, strained relationships, and the psychological adaptation to permanent displacement remains largely invisible to the people who benefit from their sacrifice. Offshore wind work reveals both the extraordinary adaptability of human psychology and the genuine limits of what people can endure. These crews have pushed those limits further than most people thought possible, creating a new form of industrial work that demands everything from its practitioners.